The cell was 6 feet by 9 feet. Concrete door, steel door, one bucket, one blanket. No window, no clock, no sound except the fluorescent light buzzing overhead. When Von Lee stood in the center of that room and realized he couldn't touch both walls at the same time if he spread his arms, he was 34 years old. He'd been a Buddhist monk, then a democracy activist in Vietnam. He'd organized protests, published underground newspapers, gave speeches that made the government nervous. They arrested him on a Tuesday morning, charged him with undermining state unity. The sentence? 8 years. The reality? 1,847 days in solitary confinement. 5 years alone. What happened in that cell didn't break him the way you'd expect. It did something stranger. It taught him that everything he believed about leadership was wrong. Before the cell, Lee was a different kind of leader. Charismatic, passionate, loud. He believed in the power of crowds, collective action, the energy of people united behind a cause. His speeches drew thousands. His writing inspired movements. He thought leadership meant giving people hope, vision, a reason to fight. He thought he understood suffering because he'd seen it in the streets, families forced from their homes, journalists disappearing, students beaten by police. He thought witnessing suffering was the same as experiencing it. He was wrong. The arrest happened fast. 5 officers, no warning, dragged from his monastery before dawn. No trial, no lawyer, just a room with a judge who read the sentence and left. They put him in the back of a van with no windows and drove for 6 hours to a prison in the mountains where nobody would look for him. The warden told him one thing before closing the cell door. You wanted silence from the government. Now you have it. The first week was physical. His body rebelled against the stillness. Muscles cramped, joints ached. His spine felt like it was collapsing. He'd been a monk. He knew meditation, knew stillness. But this wasn't meditation. This was forced immobility, trapped stillness. He tried to exercise, push-ups, squats, pacing the 6-foot length of the room. But there was nowhere to go, nothing to do, nobody to see. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was violent. He screamed once just to hear his own voice. The sound died in the concrete. No echo, no response. Like the room swallowed it. After that, he stopped making noise. By day 10, he lost track of time. The light stayed on 24 hours, no day, no night. He tried counting meals to track days, but sometimes they came twice in what felt like hours. Sometimes not at all for what felt like days. Sleep became random. He'd collapse from exhaustion, wake up in what could have been minutes or hours. Time stopped being linear. It became liquid, shapeless, untrustworthy. On what he thought was day 23, though it could have been 15 or 40, he found something. A gap in the wall, barely visible. Just a crack in the concrete near the floor where 2 sections didn't quite meet. He pressed his face to it and saw light. Not from outside, from another cell. There was someone on the other side. He whispered, "Hello?" Nothing. He tried again. "Can you hear me?" A voice, faint, exhausted. "Stop talking. They'll punish you." "Who are you?" "Someone who's been here longer than you. Stop talking." The voice disappeared, but Lee had heard it. Proof that he wasn't the only one. Proof that reality still existed beyond the walls. He went back to that crack every day. Most days, silence, but some days the voice came back. It belonged to a man named Thang, a journalist. He'd been in solitary for 3 years. They'd talk in whispers, 3 or 4 minutes before one of them heard footsteps and stopped. Thang didn't give hope, He gave warnings. Don't try to remember who you were. That person's gone. Stop thinking about the outside. It'll drive you insane. The goal isn't survival, it's disappearance. Become nothing, and they can't touch you. Lai didn't believe him, not at first. He created rituals to fight the erasure. Every morning, or what he decided was morning, he'd recite the names of everyone he'd ever organized with. 53 names. He'd say them one by one, until he could see their faces. Then he'd do mental exercises, math problems, reciting poems, rebuilding speeches from memory. He'd divide the cell into zones, sleeping corner, exercise corner, thinking corner, and rotate through them like they were different rooms. He invented games. He'd imagine he was teaching a classroom, delivering lectures on philosophy, democracy, history. He'd argue with himself, play both sides of a debate. Sometimes he won, sometimes he lost. It worked. For months it worked. He stayed sharp, stayed present, stayed himself. Until he didn't. The breaking point came suddenly. He woke up, or he thought he woke up, and saw his father sitting in the corner of the cell. His father had been dead 12 years. Lai knew this, knew it wasn't real, but the hallucination didn't care. His father looked at him and said, "Why are you still fighting?" Lai tried to ignore it, closed his eyes, focused on breathing. When he opened them, his father was still there. "You think you're a leader," his father said, "but look at you, alone, forgotten, irrelevant." Lai shouted at the hallucination, told it to leave. It didn't. It stayed for hours or days. Time had stopped meaning anything, and at some point, Lai stopped fighting it. He sat across from the hallucination and asked, "What do you want me to see?" His father smiled, "That you were never in control, not once." That's when it clicked. Everything Lai believed about leadership was built on one assumption, that leaders create change by influencing people. You inspire, you organize, you move the crowd. But in that cell, there was no crowd. No followers, no movement, no influence. Just him and the choice of how to respond to something he couldn't change. He realized leadership isn't about controlling outcomes. It's about controlling your response to the uncontrollable. The guards controlled the door, the light, the meals, the silence. But they didn't control how he thought, what he chose to focus on, or how he narrated his own story. That was his, entirely his. And in a strange way, that was more power than he'd ever had in front of a crowd. Because a crowd can turn, a movement can fracture, people can betray you. But this internal authority, nobody could take. Not unless they gave it to them. Fang had said, "Become nothing and they can't touch you." But Lai understood it differently. Become everything. Hold the entire world inside your mind. They can take your body, your freedom, your future, but they can't take the space between your thoughts. That's where leadership actually lives. 6 months before his release, something happened that tested this philosophy. A new guard started working the block, younger, nervous. One night he opened the food slot and whispered, "I can get you out of solitary, move you to general population, but you have to stop writing." Lai had been scratching messages into the walls with a pebble, tiny letters, philosophical reflections, poetry, manifestos. The guard had been reading them during inspections. "They make me nervous," the guard said. "Your words, they stay in my head. I can't stop thinking about them. If they catch me leaving them there, I could lose my job or end up in a cell like yours." It was a test, or a trap, or both. Lai thought about it for 3 days. General population meant people, conversation, sanity. But it also meant giving up the one thing he still controlled, his words.
He told the guard, "No." The guard looked confused. "You'd rather stay alone?" Lee said, "I'd rather stay free." The guard never came back. When they finally released him, Lee expected relief. Instead, he felt terror. The world was too loud, too fast, too many people. He couldn't sleep in a bed. It felt too open, too vulnerable. He slept on the floor in the corner of his room for 6 months. Daylight hurt his eyes. Conversations exhausted him. He'd lost 40 pounds. His hearing had deteriorated. He had tremors in his hands that never fully stopped. But something else had changed. The way Lee saw leadership.
After solitary, he led through questions. He stopped telling people what to fight for. He started asking them what they were willing to suffer for. Because he'd learned something in that cell. Inspiration fades. Motivation runs out. The only thing that sustains a movement is people who've made a private internal choice that nobody can touch. Not because a leader convinced them, because they convinced themselves. Lee's new philosophy wasn't about building crowds. It was about building individuals who couldn't be broken. He started small, trained people one-on-one, taught them mental resilience exercises, the same ones he'd used in solitary. He taught them how to lead themselves first, how to find stillness in chaos, clarity in confusion, purpose in suffering. His movement became quieter, smaller, less visible, but stronger. Because when the government came for them, and it did, they couldn't break. They'd already learned what Lee learned. The real battlefield isn't out there. It's in here. Here's the twist Lee discovered years later. The crack in the wall, the gap where he talked to Tang, was fake. There was no journalist named Tang. The gap led to an empty cell. Had for years. The guards confirmed it after Lee was released, showed him the layout. The voice he'd heard, the warnings, the conversations, all hallucinations. Lee realized his mind had given him the ally he needed when no one else would. When he found out, Lee laughed. Not because it was funny, because it proved his point. The mind can create reality, connection, meaning, even in a 6x9 concrete box where none exists. That's not weakness, that's power. The guards thought solitary would erase him. Instead, it taught him that no one can erase you unless you let them. Lee spent the rest of his life leading differently. He didn't chase visibility. He built quiet networks of people who couldn't be seen, couldn't be stopped, couldn't be broken. He taught them what solitary taught him. The most dangerous person to any system isn't the one shouting in the streets. It's the one who's found stillness in the chaos. The one who's decided privately, internally, that no punishment changes what they know to be true. That's untouchable. That's leadership. If you're leading anything, a team, a family, a movement, your own life, understand this. You don't control outcomes. You never did. You control your interior, your thoughts, your responses, your story. And when you master that space, when you can sit in a 6x9 concrete box for 5 years and come out more certain of who you are than when you went in, nobody can take that from you. Not a government, not a boss, not a betrayal, not failure. Solitary confinement didn't break Lee. It revealed what was already true. The strongest thing you'll ever lead is yourself. Everything else is downstream from that. If this story hit you, if something inside shifted while you were listening, do me a favor. Don't just scroll past. Hit that subscribe button. Turn on notifications. Because this channel isn't about empty motivation or quick fixes. It's about real stories, real lessons, the kind that change how you see yourself and what you're capable of. Drop a comment below and tell me, what's the one thing about yourself that nobody could take, even if they tried? Say it. Own it. Let's build something here. I'll see you in the next one.